Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New York Review of Architecture issue release event. I'm a member of SLAB Collective. My name is Russell, and we've been invited to host the event tonight, which we're calling Real Time. We hope you've had a chance to read the prompt and understand a little bit about what we're trying to do. But in a nutshell, we want everyone here to participate in a collaborative drawing. So while we get started, we ask that you go and try the app that we'll be using for the event. Many of you are already on the main board, but if you could go to a regular board at awwapp.com, allapp.com, you can just test the tooltips and try out the different drawing tools they have available for you. So while we're getting introductions going, test out the tooltips, get familiar so that once we start the drawing, you guys will be ready to go. To start, NYRA is going to introduce themselves and the latest issue being released. So take it away, Nicholas.
Hi, welcome everybody to Zoom. I'd encourage everybody actually who's on Zoom to go ahead and type your name and where you're from into the chat just to say hi. And I'll get the boring stuff done as fast as possible. So first, some shout outs. Our production editor, Sarah Casper, our social editor, Julie Turgeon, our web developer, Lex Beautyman, our video director, James Coleman, our Skyline editor, Zazu Swistle, our budget maestro, Amir Sharif, and our managing editor, Dante Furioso. The New York Review of Architecture reviews architecture in New York. Fundamental to that verb review is our core rule, no propaganda. You must review. You cannot write about your own work. By engaging with the work of others, by dispatching correspondence to New York's wealth of events to take notes and quotes, by listening, we knit New York's architecture world together. We work with a team of photographers, artists, and the graphic designers Laura Fox-Grover and Chase Booker to make those dispatches into a paper beautiful, punchy, and so short you can read the whole thing over lunch. As the review's publisher, it is incumbent on me to take a moment to talk about the money. All of our editors are volunteers. We pay all of our writers and artists. Not nearly enough, but a typical issue normally sets us back about $2,000. We can do that because of our sponsors, Deborah Burke, Sowen McGowan, Workshop APD, Robert A. and Stern Architects, Todd Williams, Balassian Architects, and the Architectural League, and because we have paying subscribers. For $4 an issue, you too can be a subscriber, supporting our work, supporting the post office, and receiving a beautiful review in the mail each month. NYRA.nyc/subscribe. These are, of course, unusual and trying times. We have no idea what the coming months will bring, and most of the conversation is now on Zoom, but our team and collaborators have risen to the challenge, distributing issues by PDF, making our pitch sheet email weekly. Here's our pitch sheet, providing more Instagram dispatches, and posting our first ever video. The core of the publication remains, however, the monthly broadsheet. We have recently had a lot of people asking for back issues of this broadsheet. We do not actually have extra copies for most of our old issues, but I always say that our best issue, our most collectible issue, our most important issue is our next issue. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Dante Furioso, our managing editor, who will introduce issue number 11.
Hi, everyone. This is Dante, managing editor. Can you guys all see my screen? Am I good? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Cool. So yeah, so I'm going to introduce our next issue, which goes out today, actually tomorrow. But so this is issue 11, and I think I would first just like to say that this is our 1-year anniversary, which is pretty incredible, actually. I don't think when we were all gathered last winter, putting this together and putting out our first issue in May of 2019, we knew exactly what, you know, how far this would go. And so I guess like in architectural publication, you know, years, you know, turning one is like, I don't know, like turning like 45 or something, making like the really OGs of the architectural publication world, like Architectural Record, you know, take on an age like Moses or something like that. But anyway, so we're a year old, so that's exciting. But I'm just gonna jump right into our issue, our second issue, kind of in pandemic land. You know, we're all still in our apartments, we're all still on Zoom. Hopefully it won't last for too much longer, but I guess, you know, that's definitely influenced what we're writing about. And it seems that a lot of people are really turning to books and movies, books that they're rereading or movies that they didn't get to see before. And so the fiction and cinema are kind of becoming metaphors or way-ins to thinking about the city in the time of pandemic. And so recalling the adventures and meanders of pre-COVID times, Alex Klimovsky reflects on street life by way of her own meander through everyone from Scorsese to Solnit to the NYPL. Ben Dooley sees parallels with our current confinement and our new bodies that a lot of us have acquired during quarantine with Otessa Moshfegh's novel My Year in Rest and Relaxation. And Molly O'Loughlin Kemper sees echoes actually of the current quarantine dynamics in the much lauded film Parasite. And we're happy to have an article by Stephanie Choi, who actually is reflecting on the potential of copper, the material, to provide really an analytical lens through which we can understand our changing relationship with tactility, hygiene, and even privacy. We also have 3 pieces that really deal with sort of bigger issues of architectural practice. So Chris Beck interrogates new notions of essential architecture, which is something that's really kind of, as far as I know, come to the fore in the last few months. And he's highlighting the way that the pandemic has actually turned architectural firms and what they value completely on their head. And then Leopoldo Velarde is reviewing some of the unsung heroes of New York City's 20th century office architecture with his review of 2 Park Avenue, which is actually where Ayn Rand worked collecting notes for her novel, The Fountainhead. And I'm actually imagining days after the pandemic when we can all band together and form architectural co-ops, or unions for that matter. At least I felt inspired that we could do this reading Peggy Deemer's article in the latest issue of Log. And finally, we have a dispatch from the land of communes, real communes, although I think they're mainly organized using Slack in San Francisco. Eric Rogers dives into the effects of the pandemic on communal living in the Bay Area. And we're happy to have, rounding out that piece, illustrations from Amelin Ung's, and so that's a special, all of that, those 2 are a special feature, an insert for issue 11. And so with that, I'll turn it over to SLAB. We're really excited that they're hosting the event and kind of pushing the envelope for what an online format can look like. I'm definitely looking forward to face-to-face meetings and events in real buildings. But I think it's also interesting to kind of interrogate what we can do with technology as we're kind of all collectively experiencing this moment and seeing, what is the feedback between making and drawing and discourse. So with that, I'll turn it back over to SLAB.
Yeah, thanks Dante and Nicholas, and thanks NYRA for allowing us to host this. We've been really looking forward to tonight, and again, just as a sort of logistical note, for those just joining or those that haven't yet, take some time now to try out the app. We're going to drop a link into the Zoom chat. I'll do that right now, actually. And this is going to be an app, just a landing page where you can test out the app for a little bit while we do some introductions. So to get started, we wanted to welcome our guest critics, some of which you probably see on your chat. We have Jimenez Lai. With his practice, Bureau Spectacular, as well as his teaching, Jimenez seeks to build narrative worlds with spaces that dissolve into a kaleidoscope of interpretations on closer look. Take a look at his practice's website, check out some specific projects, Future Archaeologist, his MoMA PS1 entry Pool Party, his installations at Coachella, the Chicago Biennial, SF MoMA, and Arroyo Seco Music Festival. He has taught at Columbia GSAP, Texas Tech, and is currently teaching at UCLA. Jimenez, what color would you like your markups to be? Do you have a preference? Oh, he's on mute.
Can I have magenta?
Yeah, magenta. That's what we were figuring. Yeah, cool. Next, we have Oana Stănescu, a master of dead serious whimsy. Oana is a practitioner and thinker, making spaces and conversations that change the way you think of the world, while you also have some fun. If you haven't already, check out Plus Pool, the off-white stores she designed, the proposal for Central Bridge in Slovenia, and her work with the musician Kanye West. She has taught at MIT, the Architecture Association, Columbia GSAP, Cooper Union, the International Program for Design and Architecture in Bangkok, and is currently at Harvard GSD, where she teaches the course Non-Professional Practice, examining creative practices outside the norm. Oana, you had been using purple in previous tests. Is that your markup color of choice?
Yes, sir.
Great. And then our third guest critic, Andrew Kovacs. Andrew is the curator of the Endless Digital Rolodex of Inspiration, Archive of Affinities, and also leader of his own practice. Andrew brings an eye that transcends space-time and scale and weaves disparate objects into delightful, confusing, and cohesive ideas. Check out his colossal cacti from Coachella, his mashups and floor plans, architectural cliff for the storefront for art and architecture, his mini master plan dog park, and his many objects and installations created for galleries and exhibitions. He has taught at Syracuse, UCLA, and is currently at USC. Andrew, do you have a preference for your mark?
Any color is fine.
Well, I just wanted to just quickly introduce ourselves. Russell and I, we're part of SLAB Collective. We're a group of 5 architectural professionals who host events, write, and hold a monthly seminar on topics relevant to architecture. While we've hosted many events, this particular format is certainly an experiment for us. And we're really happy you're here to try it with us. We hope tonight is an opportunity to do something sort of fun and collaborative, kind of a little bit different than a typical Zoom meeting. And you know, we're really looking forward to seeing your work on the page and hearing from our guest critics. Yeah, I'll turn it over to Russell now.
Great. So the prompt for this evening is inspired in part by recent discussions that are happening within professional sports, but we've taken it to sort of an absurd conclusion. So we're going to jump into the prompt right now, and this is going to be what's guiding our collective drawing. In July 2020, in a Hail Mary decision, the NFL, MLB, and NBA announced that they'll be constructing a highly secure remote facility to carry out their seasons isolated from the rest of the world, still beset with COVID-19. To house all the athletes, coaches, managers, doctors, broadcasters, and select few super fans, the facility would require over 50 million square feet. Based on the discerning LinkedIn search, the consortium has hired SLAB to design this building/city. But due to a Zoom-related security breach of the Autodesk servers, all software licenses for all of our users have been suspended. And without access to our files or software, we're scrambling to recreate months of SD for 50 million square feet in the next couple hours. So this is where you come in. We need all hands on deck to develop a set of drawings that we're going to take to the meeting. And we really appreciate your help. During this process, Andrew, Oana, and Jimenez are going to be providing live critique through red lines and discussions. So look out for their cursors on the board. Be sure to label the ideas and the drawings that you're doing so they can respond to them. And they'll each also have the specific color that they mentioned earlier. While you guys are getting started on the drawing as well, we'll be asking them some questions related to drawing and the practice of architecture. At this point, if everyone could please join the main board. This was the board that was sent out in an email. Chris will also post it in the Zoom chat.
Yep.
Editing is going to initially be off, so don't worry if you can't draw at this point. But please take the time to update your name by clicking on the chat icon in the lower right-hand corner. And also above that chat icon, there's a button with a pointer on it. So please click that pointer so that you're sharing your pointer with the rest of the group. At this point, let's meet at the center near Via Rotunda. If you could zoom in, we're going to go over 2 important things. The first rule, if we call it that, is we'd like to really keep scale as much as possible. That way we create a more cohesive drawing. So you'll see the background has a topography of the undisclosed site where this facility is going to be, and a repeating scale in feet throughout. We've also dropped in some sports fields for reference that you can copy or drag and use as needed. If you copy them, their scale won't change. Second, there's some things to avoid, mainly because they may do something unintentional. Please avoid the element erase tool. It's an eraser with a black tip. It erases a lot really fast. Please also keep your ink to black, as our critics will be using their identifying colors. And again, please do your best to maintain scale. The app is definitely not designed to draft with this many people, so there may be some glitches, but above all, we hope you have fun. So let's get started. The experiment's about to begin, so go to the page. I'm about to turn on your editing capabilities. And to start, we'd like to work on two things. The first would be a football stadium to the north and a dormitory to the south. So we'd like everyone to focus on those two buildings while we kick off this process. So I'm now turning on everyone's editing capabilities. All right, so begin.
I like how you said begin, like it's run.
Yeah.
So anyone fill me in a little bit on the NFL? I'm trying to do my homework. What happens if it has to do something that I have no idea about?
The NFL is the National Football League for American football.
Oh yeah.
That's the one aspect that I do know.
All right. People seem to be.
Andrew, are you still having a little trouble with the board while people are drawing?
It's not working.
Okay.
But I'm trying. I've refreshed and I've cleared my cache, but it's not looking good.
Okay. We'll I'll do my best to try to figure something out while people are working, and I'll email you if I have any ideas. In the meantime, it might help if someone shares their screen in NYRA of the board, and Andrew could perhaps take a look there.
Do you want me to? Do you
Yeah,
want me to
who's
share?
NYRA?
Yeah, Dante, do you mind sharing your screen?
Sure.
And,
So I'll share my screen. Yeah, got it. 1 second.
I mean, that's pretty cool. He has three-dimensionalizing something.
So just while this is going a little bit, and people are starting to, I think people are starting to make some additions. You know, before we jump into kind of critique, give the people some chance to think through what they're doing a little bit. But you know, just for the guest critics, thanks again for joining, first of all. But I have a couple questions, you know, that just to kind of talk about that are relevant to kind of this topic. First, sort of simple one, pen or pencil. I'm curious, you know, why or what brand, you know, whoever wants to speak first.
I like
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's all I had. I'm pro pencil, and if pen, I do. There's a Japanese brand that it's nice. Pretty awesome.
Oh, nice.
You can't see much. Anyway, that's me. But I like a good pencil, and I feel people don't really do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even own any pencils, I don't think. It's all pens stolen from work, but. Jimenez?
Yeah, I only use pen. I only use pen. I never use pencil. I don't know the reason for it, because I feel like pencil suggests the possibility of undo, and I don't know. I feel like, you know, if you do something that cannot be undone, you know, yeah. Anyway, so that's the reason why. I guess I like doing doing the type of stuff that can be done. So I use Micron a lot. You know, I also use yeah, I mean Micron mostly, but yeah, Micron.
Yeah. Andrew, any ideas?
So pen or pencil was the question, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't really use pencils, I'll be honest. I prefer to make models, but when I draw, I guess I use a pen.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of everyone now. I mean, except digital pens, I suppose. But yeah, well, that's curious. You know, we learn on pencils and then we quickly graduate to pens, I suppose. So another question for the crits. What kind of drawing do you typically start with a new project? You know, what is the first line you draw, in a sense? You know,
I mean, it's sorry to say stuff like this, but maybe it depends on the project. But either plan or section or elevation, I guess. I feel like it's kind of difficult to start with perspectival drawings, plans, elevations, or sections.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. It depends, but I feel especially because in the beginning you already kind of start having certain ideas. My first drawings are always plan or section, but really with the point of trying to take stock of the space, like trying to understand the dimensions and trying to evaluate certain possibilities just based on, you know, proportions and dimensions. But it depends, but usually it's that. I don't think I begin with drawings though. I think that's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you begin with if not drawings?
I was gonna say beer. It always depends, but actually more often than not, just reading and writing. Actually, a lot of writing. I think that's how I kind of try to find my ways through my own thoughts and trying to kind of really just hold on, like try to define. Basically, what I do, even in the kind of proposal to a client, I always, whether it's typewritten or just kind of writing a letter, and I try to make it quite personal in the sense it's how I try to hold myself accountable for what interests me in the project. And it's a way to go say no to projects, but also to kind of really establish from the get-go what interests me in it and why I'm doing it, and then I kind of just establish that from the beginning. But then writing kind of stays with me throughout the process, but it's not writing that I would show to anyone, by the way. It's just kind of me trying to process my own thoughts rather than more than anything else.
That's interesting. I think one answer as well is I think a doodle is always sort of, you know, maybe it doesn't qualify as a, you know, it's not an orthographic drawing in any sense, but I think I think a doodle is still valid as a sort of drawing of your project. If anyone wants to take that answer as well.
Andrew, you mentioned that you primarily start with model, or do you?
Yeah, I think like, you know, as Jimenez said, you know, it's not a very clear answer, but it depends on the project, right? But, you know, when I actually like draw with a pen, I like to draw like elevations and like, you know, I'll draw plans. But usually they're just like very quick sketches.
Sure. So, you know, turning back to the board a bit, looks like there's been quite a bit of additions. Some people have added art. Seems to be some perspectives going on, which is interesting. I'm curious if our guest critics have any opinions on what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
I mean, that perspective room, this room over, I don't know if my cursor is showing up, that room over here, it was kind of nice until somebody ruined it with these spikes. But
Yeah.
I really love these. Someone's. I mean, I think it was Miha or somebody who was extruding these shapes. It's pretty cool. I mean, I don't know how critical we're supposed to be, you know, as critics, but yeah, I think these extrusions are pretty cool. You know, that one. There's another extrusion over there.
Well, into the squiggles at the bottom.
What was that?
Zoom into, but I can't. I'm into the squiggles at the bottom.
Oh,
Oh, in the lower part of the map.
is it?
In the landscape, just because it kind of juxtaposes to the grid that comes from the soccer field or like whatever the fields, and the grid in general.
Yeah, and also those lines that Oana's talking about, they also imply some kind of circulation path.
Yeah.
It's, you know, almost as though some people have walked all around these fields.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach to the creating sort of a line type there with the erase, and I guess that's the erase, or actually just individual segments for each dash. I think that's a good effort on whoever did that.
Andrew, are you able to see enough through the observed board?
Yeah, it looks like a mess. And I think that's great. I don't think it's messy enough, to be honest. But I can only see it in the Zoom, because for some reason I cannot get this. It will not work. I would make more of a mess, and I like the rebel that decided to take the plan and like three-dimensionalize things.
Yeah, I really like that too.
And yes, someone also drew, it looks like Venturi has made an appearance, as well as, I don't know if it was the same person who has decided to three-dimensionalize their buildings, but.
But is the Venturi, is that are we supposed to understand like the person who drew around, I think it's like a football field, right? And it looks like it's like on top of a tower. Is that the profile of Venturi's house into a tower? Is that how we're supposed to understand this?
Good question.
Yeah, if people drawing want to add labels or anything like that to explain your ideas, or you could maybe even put them into the chat in the lower right-hand corner if we're talking about it. I'm noticing there's not a dormitory yet. So maybe that can get going.
Yeah, also one thing just for the audience and I know you all might be busy drawing, but if you have any questions for our critics, certainly drop them in the Zoom chat, I think is probably the best. And we can kind of bring those up as they come in.
Also, I'd like to encourage our critics to mark up with your colored tooltips. The more ink we have on the page, the better, I think.
Except Andrew, of course.
Except Andrew. Maybe you can guide Dante verbally.
Oh, God.
Apologies again that that's not working.
I don't think it's your fault.
Are you using Chrome or Safari?
I'm using Safari.
Maybe if you have Chrome.
I'll try it in Chrome.
Yeah, let's see if that works.
And Andrew, you may want to stop your recording.
I've done that.
Okay.
First step.
Yeah, who's doing the big kind of strokes in the grid pattern? Like what's going on there?
I'm trying to zoom out.
I don't know
Part
about
of the page is it on?
Oh,
Oh yeah, I see that.
That's some what's his name? That's some dogma right there.
PV orally. I guess on the far right, there's a extremely abstracted pickle Rick.
I'm seeing a question from the audience, and I know that some of our guest critics have been on reviews as well. It is, what types of changes or differences have you noticed in presentations since your students' work has gone virtual? Does anyone want to take that on?
Sure. I mean, I think what I noticed, and I'm curious about the other critics or everyone, it's the digital raises or forces a certain type of, like, you're limited in how you present. For example, in Zoom, you're in complete control over what the audience sees, one drawing at a time, when typically at the review would go to a model or, you know, choose the drawing that you kind of want to look at and go closer to it and so on and so forth. But in Zoom, that's not really possible. So people use the kind of Miro board or whatever that's called, or we use websites in our studio. But I basically, I think my conclusion was that there's two types of reviews or outcomes. One were studios that or situations where people weren't able to transition or take advantage of the digital or pivot in any way. And I think you could feel that backfired at times. Like, there's certain things that just won't work well on Zoom. Like, if you try to play your video and then stream it on Zoom to the audience, it's just gonna go shit, right? Like, things like that. But then there were other studios that really were able to take advantage of it, and it worked in their favor. Because to me, that was actually one of the exciting things about going digital. You have to narrate with a lot more precision, because everyone just, you know, stares at you and every single drawing that you put up. So there needs to be a logic to how you present. And I thought it was a good opportunity to actually learn how to do that, and then to also work, for example, with the digital, with the website format. Even when we actually used analog tools quite a bit, but then integrated them in the digital. And from my experiences, that's something that you can't quite do when you are in the same space or in the same physical space. It's really hard to then kind of try to deploy digital tools, just because it's a lot easier to just yell at someone or just, like, you know, scribble on something rather than try to, yeah, make that point otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Oana. I think, you know, the space doesn't really, well, one of the things that the Zoom space doesn't really allow for, what do you call that, videos to be played very smoothly, which drove some of the students to, you know, engage with YouTube a little more. So people are uploading their videos to YouTube now. Sometimes they'll just put the YouTube link in the chat box, and people will watch you know, and then suddenly the whole room will be watching the YouTube links separately, but in silence. And I think that's interesting. I also find it that, you know, physically, so for example, at GSAB, I don't know if people here are familiar with Avery Hall. Rooms like 504 or something like that, you know, those are pretty tiny. I would say maybe not even 200 square feet, you know, they're really, really small. And so the way that your voice projects, not just the presenter, but also the critics, the way that your voice projects, you know, works a little differently than, let's say, if you're at Crown Hall in Chicago, IIT, you know, the space is so large and there's not, I mean, it doesn't really dampen very well. The acoustics doesn't afford for clear dialogues. And so in the past, I found that, you know, I'll say something where the critics sitting next to me would say something, or the presenter will say something, and there's just either miscommunication or a loss in translation. And as well, the people, let's say the classmates of the presenter, whereas they would have been congregating behind the review, maybe chit-chatting with each other, not being able to, not that they didn't want to pay attention, it's just that they couldn't pay attention since the acoustics weren't working I've been finding that the virtual review space affords much clearer focus. People seem to understand each other a lot more. So that's a change. That's a change for sure.
That's a good point. A lot of my students brought it up too, that there's a precision to the feedback, if only because there's less kind of small talk, less distraction, and everyone way more kind of precise and direct feedback, which is nice actually. So I think many of my students actually like the online format and felt closer to the jury.
Cool. Yeah, it's been.
And you know, in addition, oh, sorry.
I'll go for it.
I was going to say, in addition to that, I think ideas of referencing stuff, like there are times that, you know, in a more conventional in-person review, someone might drop a reference about a book, but then the reference that was just made would show up in the chat box. You know, if another person in the room knows about the book, it'll just immediately show up. And so notes are taken in real time, you know, which I think is really positive.
Yeah, I think I've noticed similar things on reviews. One thing though that I also noticed is that there seems to be less sort of argument between critics, at least on the ones I've been on. I don't know if you guys have experienced that as well, but I think it's just hard to maintain sort of the, I guess the immediacy of just a back and forth. And I think everyone has much more, and it's, you know, it's probably better for the students, but it's an interesting sort of outcome of it that they don't really hear us talking like we do to each other. It's a bit more sort of stilted and less argumentative. I don't know if that's anything you guys have noticed, but wow, this board is going crazy.
Well, I think the let's say the etiquette of being on reviews, it's similar to Zoom parties. I don't know, like people have had social like Zoom situations yet, but I noticed that it's really hard to have small talks or side conversations at Zoom parties, and this maybe translates to, you know, the type of maybe more focused behavior also when it's a situation of a review. I mean, you know, in in-person reviews, I feel like there's always been a lot of kind of, let's just say, local politics that happen between the jurors, whether they have, you know, political struggles with each other for one reason or another. It gets played out in these types of arguments that you're describing. But I haven't felt that. I feel like Zoom doesn't seem to be the type of space that affords that, actually. Not that people don't want to argue.
Yeah, I think we had productive, just productive conversations or disagreements, but less of the kind of, I mean, it's just less small talk and less of the, you know, infighting.
Andrew, did you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, like you always have to like wait your turn to speak on Zoom, you know, like, so there's like, everyone's constantly interrupting each other, you know, like the dynamic of like actually like talking collectively in person is kind of like, I mean, it's still there a little bit, but it's much harder, I think, to, you know, really get a sense of things. And maybe that's also like the small talk that Jimenez needs. But in terms of, I don't know, like students, in terms of students, I agree that I think you have to be much more focused in terms of how you present and what you present on Zoom. And I actually really appreciate that aspect of it.
I mean, it's interesting too. It's very, I think if Fall State goes online, it's going to be a very different situation. I think we, from an educational or academic perspective, I think we're extremely lucky with when this hit and when it happened. Because at least for us, it was in the middle of the semester. So we got to actually meet each other in person, get to know each other, you know, build a little bit of a collective. make models, do all of that. So by the time things hit, then it's kind of we moved into production, into how to draw and kind of present the project digitally. But I think an entire semester online without ever kind of getting to know each other in person is going to be a lot more difficult. And I will say, I feel, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I will say at the end, by the end of the semester too, I was also kind of quite exhausted by the Zooming thing, because I find that just talking to a screen for hours and then shutting it down, it's kind of like it echoes in your head or something. There was a weird emptiness that's sort of left behind. It takes a lot more effort, right? Because you don't have the body language and you don't have any of those things that kind of are able to convey nuance in a desk grid, for example. So I think it takes a bigger effort for the kind of informal desk grid type of conversation. So
yeah, I agree with that a lot. I think because, you know, like when you do like a desk grid over Zoom, it's just like that, like 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you know, and then, you know, if you had another thought about it, or there's like something else comes up later, like rather than just like telling it to the person, you have to like email them or something.
And one thing I've noticed in meetings as well, speaking to like the interpersonal connection, is in large conference calls when everyone's muted, there'll be moments when everyone unmutes to laugh, to laugh on air, I guess. And I find that really interesting. I think it's important, and it's a great kind of personal thing, but it's funny to think about unmuting yourself to chuckle at a passing remark.
Yeah, that's something Mark Fustergage mentioned in the last NYRA event, that it's pretty much impossible to do humor over Zoom or to make jokes. And I think he probably was right.
All right, so real quick, we've made a lot of progress on the board. We're excited to send this to the client. We're not sure if they're going to understand it, but we need to move on to the section. So what we're going to do is quickly pause everyone's editing capabilities.
yeah, try stopping us.
I can do it. I have the admin privileges. So we're going to use this moment.
Can I mark something up?
Yeah, definitely.
Can we talk about why it says Free North Korea?
What's your markup for that?
No, I just want to know what that's all about before I mark it up.
If someone's interested in explaining, they can do so in the chat.
I think we've broken through the firewall somehow.
Also, there was a jail.
Yeah, the jail's been deleted.
Jail was edited out.
What about the abstract pickle Rick with the ball? Is that?
And did like Nicholas just like copy the same red painting everywhere?
Yes. Well, there might be differences. I don't know. No, they're all the same. Yeah.
All right. So real quick, I have now added a large black swath at the bottom, and I believe the scale for the sky will still work as the topo. So we're going to end up drawing over the other drawing, but what we'd like to start with at this point is a broadcast tower, because remember, the primary goal that we're providing for the NFL here is the ability to broadcast all of these games all around the world. So once I give back editing capabilities, we'd like to start with a tower that can broadcast all of these games and then go from there. So I am now turning on everyone's edit abilities. So please jump back in and start with the broadcast tower.
Also,
I saw MC Hammer join the board, so I think he should be the performer, the Super Bowl performer. Left the board. There you go.
Chris, were you going to say something?
yeah, also just in the bottom right, if anyone can see my cursor, I'll just put a red box around it. But we've added some entourage people so that you can maintain the scale that you've so rigorously kept this entire time. That
My
might.
lines are purely accidental. Just like that.
Yes, we seem to have some people scribbling, and again, if you try to keep scale, we'll do our best, but we need the tower to start forming.
You guys think the clients are going to like this?
They don't have a choice. They have to like it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so in the meantime, while we hopefully get a tower going, or some section drawings. Also, just a quick tip, the erase tool, you can carve some pretty interesting caves. We had a couple more questions for the panel. We sort of touched up on this earlier, but I'm curious, what we're doing here is closer to a doodle than it is architecture. I'm curious if doodling plays any significant role in your creative process, and whether or not you ever approach your doodles critically, if that makes sense.
Wait, what?
Excuse me?
Sorry, what was the question again? Doodling?
The question is if doodling plays a role in your in your creative process. If you find yourself doodling about a project idea or something in the margins.
It's like a softball for Jimenez.
Well, I mean, everybody doodles, right? Like you just kind of gotta get some ideas out there.
Were you ever able, did you ever break your hand? Sorry, it's a stupid question. Were you ever able not to doodle? I'm just curious.
Oh, like if you get injured, you mean? Like physically, can't doodle?
It's kind of terrible.
No, you know what? The thing, no, not in my adult life. I guess, like as kids, people break stuff all the time. I broke my finger at one point, so I couldn't use the pen. But generally speaking, no. But that's a really good question, though. Like, what do you do when you use the means to communicate, right?
Yeah, to communicate, and I think for me, doodling is also just like it's a matter of survival of sorts. You know what I mean? It's how you kind of think, even if it's. I feel it's not so much about the drawing itself. That's is a way of thinking, if that makes sense. And the idea to be able to do that is terrifying. I think I always have like pens on me or something like that, or pencils. So it's just curious about me.
Oh, we got a broadcast tower here. Look at that. It's got some cross bracing, some trusses, some.
It's a pretty cool tower.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I just turned into doing therapeutic bubble erasures. There's this, everyone knows Yayoi Kusama, but I read in the last year sometime, her autobiography, which was really awesome, actually. I really recommend it, because it was the, 60s, 70s New York, but she was essentially a weirdo, and she kind of describes her way of kind of doing the bubble as a way to kind of, I don't know, I can do it justice, but basically kind of make one of the entire universe, so kind of blur boundaries between things, including her own physicality and the world and the space around her. It's a really good book. I really recommend it.
What's the title of it again?
I don't remember, but I can look it up. It's just Yayoi Kusama's autobiography.
Drop it in the
chat, yeah. Andrew, are your doodles more 3D, like you mentioned?
I think it's funny that you asked like to be critical about like doodles. Like it's just a doodle. I don't know if I'm like like thinking about it like that hard. Like I think it's like, but I think that's why I sort of like I immediately thought of Jimenez, because I don't think Jimenez like Jimenez turns his doodles into like these immaculate manga comics, right? And drawings. And I think that's why it's like I'm more curious how Jimenez reacts to that question. Like, can you be critical of a doodle? I guess you can.
I mean, you can always, yeah, I mean, you can always look at a line work and say something about the quality of line work, even if it's loose or sloppy, right? Yeah, totally can, yeah.
You think people call their sketches doodles in order to avoid criticism as to kind of downplay the importance of their drawings? I mean, you know, like Peter Eisenman probably doesn't doodle, or I don't think he would call them doodles.
I think maybe the notion of criticality is overrated, or I don't know. I mean, anything you look, you automatically have, you know, your Infinity Net. Sorry, that was the book of I just realized. I think inherently in everything you do, in everything you look at or you sketch or you kind of do, you make calls on what works, what doesn't, so on and so forth. But I think this notion of hyper, you know, I don't know. Sometimes it's good to just do things and not think. It might just be my state of mind after a week of Zoom reviews.
I think part of the question too is related to exactly the process we're kind of experimenting with here. The stuff that's going on the page here is definitely closer to a doodle in my mind. So it's interesting to think about the challenge of being critical of it, or what do you encourage? It seems
I
like
thought they were supposed to do an SD set.
We're trying. I mean, right now there's going to be a lot of excavation for this project, but that might be good.
The premise is funny because, I mean, I usually draw in CAD. When I draw the plans and stuff like that, I draw in CAD. And you know the thing when you take someone else's file and you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
About my files, and you know, even the way you trim or do things like that, even watching sometimes do something on a screen while you're talking to them can be exasperating because you're like, you're doing it that way, not the other way, so on and so forth. So it becomes it's tricky, this notion of actually sharing a drawing. It's, I don't know, I'm a little bit, I think, territorial with my drawings. There's always some alignments and some kind of, you know, there's some magic there, and yeah, I'm precious about those things.
It would be nice in AutoCAD to see exactly who drew what, so you could.
Yeah.
Revit does that, right? Yeah.
So you can sue someone.
We have an interesting comment in our group chat. So according to Daniel Lee, free North Korea, sports games create revenue from advertisements. Political groups will race to display their ideologies that can be seen on Google Earth. And NFL, NBA would love to endorse ideologies that pay well. The island will be an advertisement screen in plan that will be updated along with every Google Map update. Wow, that's an interesting take. So North Korea would have the money to co-opt that. I guess who would broker that? Dennis Rodman, right? He has a relationship with North Korea.
Are you guys seeing anything worth pointing out in the drawing of this section?
I don't see a section at all.
No, I don't see a section either. I mean, also, sorry to be a stickler about things, like when I see splines that spline a certain way, I get really freaked out. Right now I'm a little freaked out, I guess.
What spline are you seeing?
I don't know. Just don't want to make anyone feel bad.
I think that's.
But that's just my personal opinion. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. But
No. I think that's a good point. I feel that happens a lot, you know, for example, in student work or in projects in general, when people try to do organic forms or hand-drawn forms, but then they do them on a computer and are not in control over them. Like, to your point, sometimes you see a corner, like a hint of a corner or an arch not really, I don't know, there's definitely things that kind of always feel very wrong to your point, especially with splines. I think that's partially too because I watched Sejima draw those kind of things for hours and hours on end. So I think there's some inherent art to how those things are happening. Could be happening, should be happening.
So one of the questions that we asked people when they were filling out the RSVP is that some feedback is direct and actionable, and some feedback is provocative and enigmatic. Do you guys have a preference for the type of feedback you like to give between those two polls and the feedback that you like to get?
What were the polls?
One is direct and actionable, and the other one is provocative and enigmatic.
Whichever it is, it needs to be direct.
What was that?
Direct, as direct as possible. I think it's always strange when or I have a hard time when people try to be polite or are wary to say what they're thinking. Because I think it's the only kind of productive way. Now, I don't, at times it can be great for it to be enigmatic and other times actionable, but not, I care less about actionable, but I do appreciate the direct comment a lot more than people talking in circles.
Yeah, I mean, I take reviews pretty seriously. I definitely appreciate specificity when people speak. And so whether it's immediately actionable or enigmatically provocative, I think so long as there's a degree of specificity and it's not designed to hurt anyone, I think, I mean, I personally don't like comments that are designed to hurt people. But it's just me. And I also think on specific comments are it can turn pretty annoying.
You have an example?
Since we want to be specific.
Yeah. Or we can leave that as a provocative statement.
Are any of you guilty of doing just the 3 question marks as a markup? I know I've received that many a time in professional settings.
I'm sure I did. I definitely did question marks in drawings, but I don't feel guilty about it. In general. I mean, maybe that's just me.
It's code for
I always think, in the context of school, I feel it's very different in a professional context. In the context of school, I do feel the reviewer's job is not so much to just critique, but to actually point towards a way forward. It's easy to critique things, and it's easy to shit on things. It's a lot harder to try to understand an idea and to point towards a way of making it better. And I encourage students to think of reviews their way too. I mean, projects like this, especially in the context of school, are rarely ever final or feel final. And to me, a great review is a review where people were able to shed different perspectives on a project, show you aspects of it that you didn't see or understand before. And that's when you actually get excited because you're like, oh shit, I could do this, or I could push it further, so on and so forth. And then that's awesome. And I feel oftentimes there are critics who are kind of just, kind of dismissing something and then whatever, going on a tangential rant. But I do feel there's a responsibility there in actually trying to point towards a way forward.
Yeah.
Andrew, do you have any comments here?
Yeah, I would just say to be as straightforward as possible. But so who gave you a markup with just 3 question marks?
Or what did you draw?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I drew. I think it was a baseboard detail that just was not even remotely appropriate. I'm guessing. I still don't know. I just assumed it was wrong because of the 3 question marks, but who knows? That's the enigmatic side, I suppose.
I like the little people in the basement or the dungeons.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Whoever drew that can also label that as a basement or a dungeon, depending. We have another question in the chat coming from Matthew Selmer. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He's asking, can an orthogonal drawing be a doodle? I couldn't figure out how to draw straight lines in this program. Well, one quick tip for straight lines that I figured out was to use the rectangle and just make a very thin rectangle, and you can get a really, really straight line. But, you know, I think the question is still worthy.
So, yes, right? Isn't it just yes? Yes.
Yeah. Is it an orthogonal drawing be a doodle, or can a doodle be an orthogonal drawing? Is there better wording for that?
I think it's yes.
So yeah, everything we've drawn here is an orthogonal drawing then. So by your own admission.
Well, I mean, even I guess, you know, early on when Miha, I think that's the person's name, extruded some of these, you know, plan or elevations. I mean, as that is as much of an orthographic projection as you are capturing oblique surfaces anyway. So, you know, I think all of it is flat here.
So one other question that we have, just as a general one, when you're drawing on this, you're kind of exposed in a sense. I know that at least in Revit collaboration and a lot of collaborative drawing tools, you work on something and then you sync it and you send it out. So there's this kind of personal moment where you are developing your ideas. So I'm curious if you guys think that in general, you prefer to have these sort of personal time where you're on your own to test and develop ideas, or if you find that it's more productive to work in a group and to build those ideas collaboratively, either in the same room or perhaps in the future through really real-time tools such as this.
I would say both, right? Like, I think it's important to kind of work alone, but it's also really important to work in groups, right? And have collaborators. So I think it's a little bit of both for me.
Do you find that you lean towards one or the other at different stages in a project?
Sure. I mean, also depends on what the project is, right? Like, and then I don't know, I think there may be also just some things that you like work on by yourself, right? Like, I think Jimenez does his doodles by himself. But I know Jimenez.
Or in conversations, you know.
Sure, but like the actual drawing, like that's done by you.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That's kind of what I'm.
Yeah. But sometimes, you know, you can't, I mean, the quality of the drawing sort of maybe reflects the quality of the conversation, you know? But yeah, generally speaking, you're kind of alone.
I think the question is a little bit too open-ended in the sense that for me, the beauty of architecture internalized in its open-endedness, it depends so much on project, on phase, you know, is it marking up for people, is it construction drawings, is it production of drawings, is it drawings to design or experiment to kind of figure out the language, so on and so forth. So there's so many sides to the process that I think the answer is going to be depends on the circumstances. I think any tool at the end of the day can be useful. I find, for example, in running the office, if you're remote, I oftentimes find that then people do better work if they just have to send you a PDF or whatever. But then, of course, having a tool like this where you can collaborate from afar quite easily can be handy, or like sharing a screen or whatever. But then I think sometimes, or most of the times, also someone has to be in charge of the drawing set and things like that. And there needs to be a kind of order of things, and yeah, it can vary, right?
Cool.
I think, yeah, and I think part of my question stems from the fact that most of the tools we use kind of only allow for this independent development of drawing. I mean, unless two people are literally drawing on the same page, analog tools are generally a personal experience. But Google Docs, I think, is an example where truly real-time collaboration on the same document has started to become part of some processes. And I know that that's not yet part of architecture. And I wonder if that's because no one's built it yet, or if there's a sort of need to be able to work through your ideas without having someone watching over your shoulder sense.
Yeah, but I mean, even in Google Docs, you're not editing that file necessarily. I mean, I guess it depends, but if you write something, right, your editor or whatever, reviews it, changes things, and revise them, and you go back and forth and so on and so forth. So that does happen in architecture. You just take one file and then messing on it, and you know, in CAD you always have like here the 10 other options that I did or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think there's something about the editor's role that doesn't quite exist as such in architecture, which is interesting, maybe. Where someone would, you know, someone taking your drawings and then kind of, no, this needs to move 1 meter to the left, 2 to the right, so on and so forth, and then completely revise the thing. Like, you just don't have that kind of level of authority that could be subjective, I think, at all, right? Is there a position like that?
Could you explain it one more time, the exact position you're talking about?
The editor of, if you write a book, if you write a piece of anything, there's ultimately an editor kind of going through it and kind of crossing things out and, you know, asking 100 questions. What are you trying to say here? And saying this doesn't make sense, and kind of being an active participant in the writing. And that happens, you know, whether you write a book or an article or whatever. And the role of the editor isn't, they're rarely properly credited really for the kind of work that they do. I always find when one of my pieces is being edited, I always find it such a brutal gesture, but I mean, it's necessary, and I find it incredibly insightful too. And it's a very direct form of criticality, because it's like someone taking your drawing literally and kind of starting to slash things around. It's brutal, but it's kind of awesome too. To me, it's no different than design, because in essence, it all comes down to just bringing things down to their very essence and making the information as direct, or as kind of, in coherent, I guess, however you want to think about it, as possible. But I find that dynamic, because to me, it's not familiar coming from architecture for design. I find it really fascinating in writing. But yeah, so I can see the analogy there to design, but I think that role doesn't quite exist as such in architecture.
Dante has a follow-up question to that, asking, what's the difference between editing and critiquing?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I used to think of RAM for at one point as, and I don't know, ages ago when I was thinking about RAM. As an editor, and I think that was his main role within. Let me know. I don't know if you kind of feel similarly, but I thought that was essentially his role, right? Like looking at all the things and kind of directing things a little bit from afar, so kind of director/editor in a way. I think you can draw the analogy in that sense between editing and critiquing. All I'm saying is in writing that editing happens like on the piece, like there's words being taken out and you kind of see them in Google Docs under like straight with a strike through, and there's a brutality to that and a hypercriticality to that, which is kind of awesome.
So Chris, I think.
Yeah. So clearly we've got kind of a fantastic building / city shaping up. We think Big Sports is going to love it, but it's kind of odd the plan and the section don't match up, which is weird that you guys didn't think of that. We just got news though that Major League Soccer, Canadian football, and the Central Park Lawn Bowling Club have joined the call. So we need to expand another 1 million square feet. The thing is, we're running out of time, so we have a new rule. Just grab plans of existing buildings and drop them in. So part of that is we've hidden some plans in the drawing, which are probably completely impossible to find right now. But if you want, you guys can see on the left-hand side the upload button and the left toolbar, not the bottom left, but the bottom middle. And you guys can start dropping in some plans. And hopefully through the plans, we can kind of approximate this next 1 million square feet in the short time we have left.
And while we're starting this, Andrew, we know that you've worked a lot with collage, and we were wondering if you could speak a little bit about it. And in particular, I'm curious, when you're working with collage, do you find it as a process more like you're discovering an idea or like you're expressing an idea in terms of how you're working with the things that you find?
Yes, discovering or expressing. Like that's like, do I make a collage to discover or to express something? Is kind of what you're asking.
Basically, and I think it also is, at least when I'm looking at your work, it seems like there's a lot of found objects that are part of what you do. And I'm curious if you're looking for that specific object or if you come across it and then it gives you the idea of how to use it, if that makes any sense. And I'm sure there's...
Yeah, no, it does. It does make
yeah.
it makes total sense. And like, as dumb as it's going to sound, it's both. And here's the example, right? Like, so, I would go collect found objects because I wanted to make physical models out of them, right? And then I ended up with a bunch of objects that I didn't use also. Like I just had a big collection, right? So like I had like a toy pear, right? I had this like toy pear and I was like, okay, I don't have a project. I need another project. What if I designed a pear stand, like where you could sell pears or like a pear kiosk? Right? So like I didn't set out to find the pear. I just had I came across the pear and then I collaged some objects together and made it into a pear stand. So I don't know. I think it's like, it's maybe like, it's like more accidental discovery, accidental expression, or serendipitous.
And is that similar when you're working with floor plans of buildings? Or sections of buildings?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think some of the stuff that I've done is also just for like fun. Like
Yeah.
I sort of enjoy collaging plans together for fun. Or like because I'm bored.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I don't know. Like it's just, and then sometimes, and that sort of turns into like a kind of bigger process at times, right? Like sometimes, even though I make them for fun, sometimes I make them for other things.
So Andrew, I just have a quick question that I was curious to ask you is, I read your essay in the Possible Mediums book, and you had mentioned that model train like HO scale is an interesting place to like find sort of artifacts to collage together. This is sort of I'm just curious to ask, like, how do you feel about model train scale versus architectural scale?
Indifferent.
Do you use are most of your collage models, when you use a lot of sort of scale figures and everything, are they typically architectural or do they come from model train scale?
Yeah, it's like the Prizer figures, you know, Prizer or Atlas. Like, I think HO scale is like the most common train scale, right? So there's just also like a large quantity of stuff to like pick from.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, but and you know, like at some point they're like really cheap. You know, like they don't really cost that much to purchase. So I don't know. Yeah, like that's. But it's a sort of like fake realness, you know, like those model train kits, right? Like, because it's like brick and plastic.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I guess there's just these like the architectural world of model making and model trains, and they never really sort of intermix. You know, I've been on reviews where students have been recused for using like, you know, actual like little green moss for trees, or, you know, God forbid you paint green for grass in a model, at least in sort of a, you know, earlier undergrad school. I think that that question of, you know, is it supposed to be mini real, like a model scale, or is it supposed to be sort of representative, like I think most architectural models are more aware of?
Yeah, well, clearly for the instructors of that critique, it's the latter.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I, you know, I prefer the former, right? Like I sort of like the green moss. I like painting the grass green, right? Or like, why not? I don't know. And I think also in that sense, like as a process, like you can use that to design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Curious if Jimenez or Oana has an opinion on that as well. We also have some interesting plans being dropped in here if you guys want to comment.
This just got like way messier.
I think they listened to your advice at the beginning.
Do you like it, Andrew?
Like there was some sense of like a section before, you know, like the section's like gone now.
The archery is here. That's cool. The archery from NYRA and Pinot.
Oh, wow. I don't know if anyone on the far right side, someone went in and added different colored trees and pretty detailed version of something. And it has the,
my all app just crapped out because I can't even move anymore.
Yeah, I think we're now pushing the limits of the app. I wonder how many gigs the file has turned into. I think with that, we're curious to hear if there's any thoughts that you guys have about this. We're about to wrap up, and I think NYRA will give a little closing statement as well. But do you have any thoughts on what just happened here? I don't know what exactly it was, but I'm curious what the experience was like as a critic.
I mean, it turned out to be pretty fun after all, you know. I don't really know if I have anything critical to say. Nor should I. I feel like I don't feel like this is the forum. I mean, I do think it's super interesting to watch real time these kinds of layers of figure ground kind of overlap each other. And sometimes the figure grounds are, you know, solid. Other times they're just line work. That's really fun, I think. It's also really fun to kind of, I mean, I think the moments in which people choose to use patches of geometry versus line work, it's almost a desire to self-edit into straight lines or something. I find that to be also kind of interesting. I don't know, this is really cool.
And actually realized at one point on Zoom, the people from Nike ISPA is like a department, they're just doing ISPA stuff, which stands for Innovate, Scavenge, Protect, I can remember, something like that, not Protect, whatever. Anyway, it's a little bit of a more experimental group. So, and it was just a kind of conversation with the students, and halfway through what we started doing, actually, we just put up a whiteboard and everyone started doodling on it, speaking of. And of course, it was something completely random, but actually it felt weirdly nice. And I think a lot of the students, like, it basically, it's a, you know, ridiculous sketch doodle. And it wasn't with any explicit purpose, but it ended up being a nice way of bonding because you weren't just staring at other people's faces or your own face for that matter. And I think the doodle, it can into walking with someone and walking and talking with someone. Because you know, you can be distracted, kind of sketch and do things while also having a conversation with someone. So in that sense, I thought it was quite a nice thing. And this makes me think of the same thing. I feel it's at this point it's less about the drawing in itself as it's about what it facilitates. And there is something nice about, you know, at this point it's kind of one of the few forms of togetherness that we're allowed to have, and I think it can always be become a
I want to hear what the clients say. It's great. It was really fun, and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining. Yeah. NYRA, I think we'll turn over the mic to you to see if you guys have any last questions yourselves or anything else you'd like to say.
No, I think this has been great and fascinating, and thank you so much for organizing. And I think we kind of knew that this would be an unusual format and weren't quite sure what would come of it. I'm glad for everybody for really participating with vigor and enthusiasm.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for our participants for drawing. We know it was kind of a big ask for you guys this evening, and I think you know, we had a lot to talk about. So for all the people that have self-muted, it was really great having you all here. We appreciate your commitment.
And we also just want to thank the reviewers once again. We know that you guys are doing a lot of Zoom calls right now, and it really meant a lot that you spent the time to do this. And I think Oana, you were hitting the nail on the head with what we were trying to do here, which was give everyone a chance to work on something together, to do something a little bit playful, and then be a little bit meta about it and just kind of think about the situation that we're in, the tools that we have, and how we can continue working together given everything that's going on. So, someone jump in?
Oh, I do have, I guess, one last question for the critics, and something that was a little bit on my mind with this exercise. I think somebody pointed out to me in terms of, like, for instance, the New York Review of Architecture, we have considered having competitions and then publishing the results of those competitions. And I asked Peter Eisenman about this, and he was like, that would be a terrible idea, because as a review, you need to review, and you can't actually be creating. You should not be creating architecture, you should be reviewing architecture. And so in this situation here, we've had everybody be creating something, and we'd asked you to review it. And I guess where you draw that line, and who's supposed to be playing the role of creating and who's supposed to be playing the role of reviewing. And in a very specific logistical question, something I also wondered about with this is, would it have made sense to actually ask our three critics to have made the prompt themselves, and had more control over, like, this is what I want everybody to be drawing now, versus having SLAB making a prompt and then you trying to parse and make something of it? Because this is probably a format that I think will be tried again, and there will be tweaks, but I would hope so. And so I'm just curious what tweaks you would make and where you see that line between creation and criticality, I guess, criticism.
You want to know how to improve the app? Is that what you're asking?
No. No. In terms of, they essentially SLAB asked you here to come here tonight to critique or to comment on a prompt that they had made on what people are creating. Would it have made more sense for us to actually have you, the critics, say, here's what the prompt is, here's what I wanted to draw, and then you could critique based off of that?
Not necessary. I mean, I don't know. It can go either. I mean, it's hard to tell. It depends on what you want out of it. But I think it being a new platform and coming from SLAB, I think that's totally fine. It can be fun the other way around too, but I feel also as architects, we are good with, you know, being briefs and then making something of it. And I think the briefs can sometimes be, I don't know, like both, but I think both aspects are important in a way. On the one hand, to put out stuff, but on the other hand, also to just be flexible in how you respond to things. I think if you were to do it again, what I would maybe suggest is work on a smaller scale. Even if it's something, you know, dumb like a house or like, I don't know, but something where if you want to follow through with everyone's sort of participation in that and kind of, you know, everyone's role or every line kind of starts mattering at that scale. I think the big scale of the project kind of makes it hard to properly make sense of it. But outside of that, it's also just a kind of fun doodle. And I really kind of appreciate the kind of chaos that came out of it. But outside of that, to the other sort of side of the question, Nicholas, that I heard, I'm less interested in drawing lines between roles in general. And I do believe in the fluidity of roles and people being able to kind of cross them freely. And I think that to me, that's an important part of my practice, the kind of non-hierarchical approach where ideas can come from anywhere. And it's more about, yeah, being able to create the infrastructure to be able to have those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe Peter Eisman has much more life experience. I don't know how someone could have, you know, such clear, hard and fast rules about, you know, what to do and what not to do. I mean, if you want to run a competition, I feel like, and if you have some kind of ideas about the competition, I would just do it. You know, I don't know why, you know, I mean, I don't get the rule. I don't get that rule, that rule that you just described.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I don't get it. And maybe because it's also because he gets it. I don't know. But then I also feel like, you know, if you try to get why he gets it, you're just going to go crazy. So you might as well just do what you want to do. And with regards to this format, I do think, you know, I do wonder, you know, because right now, I mean, as a first pass, this is probably as good as it gets, but I'm wondering, you know, if there are other rules, like you can only use architectural line types or something. I don't know. If that's what you guys want to do, if you want a collective plan, you know, like dash lines mean something to us, you know, or variations of dash lines mean different things to us, you know, or like certain things, if you draw it a certain way, it even describes materiality. I don't know. I feel like that I would say that would suddenly change the nature of the drawing by a lot. And since this call seems to be people who have some degree of fluency in the line conventions, you know, I think that could be kind of interesting if you did that. But don't listen to me. Listen to yourself.
I think it would be less fun if we had to make the brief.
For sure.
So thank you for doing it.
Yeah, sure. It was not an easy feat. Yeah, I think, well, just to touch on something Jimenez said, I think there's a lot of architects that have sort of dipped their toes, especially now, into actually developing their own software for reviews, and some have even done it for drawing. I think of like Gallo Canizares at I think he's at OSU. But yeah, I think that's if we were to do this again, maybe, you know, I think maybe venturing into kind of like developing the design of the actual app could be really sort of a interesting approach too. Because I think when people have flexibility, it seems like they are flexible and they do what they want.
Great. I think unless NYRA has anything else, that'll wrap up the event. So once again, thank you, NYRA, for inviting us to do this. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you to our guest critics. We encourage all of you to get a subscription to NYRA. The articles are great. Hopefully the teaser that Dante gave at the beginning gave you a hint of how interesting the articles are. That's it from us. We'll put together the final set. We'll try to tease out some sort of workable football stadium somewhere in there. And we'll perhaps post the work on our Instagram accounts or websites, so you guys can check back in to see what we put together. And I think NYRA is also going to put together some media about the event as well. So that's it. I don't know if NYRA, do you want to do any final sign off, or do we just click end the meeting?
I think that's it.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.